For those of you who don't know me, I think everybody knows me here. We're all next jumpers, most of us. Meghan. So I'm going to give a presentation on work-life balance. So if you saw the title, you're probably wondering, what are we talking about? This is a presentation that I gave, I think it was 2 weeks ago now, invited to the Pentagon to give this presentation to a group of like really young female and some male officers. So just to give you some context, it was very well received, and I thought it would be appropriate to give it to our own staff. And I think this video, too, because we're taping it, will also be like our 2015 culture deck. So I think last year in 2014, Charlie gave the culture presentation. A lot of companies want to learn from what we're doing, and so this will be the 2015 culture presentation. And it seems kind of like a specific topic. It is, but I think it's so relevant. So I was going to talk about why it's relevant and how to tackle it. And I think it's coming from an angle that I think most people won't necessarily expect. So it should probably go about, might be like 40 minutes, depends on how quickly I can get through. When I was at the Pentagon, I think it took me almost an hour, so I'm going to try to chop it down. Okay, so do we have a work-life balance issue? I'm going to start actually with something that you probably don't think I'm going to start with, which is actually all around women's leadership. I think it was a few weeks ago, Sheryl Sandberg actually gave a talk at the Air Force Academy, so to a group of men and women within the Air Force Academy. And she was talking about women and kind of their role of leaning in and how do they get ahead in their careers. But there was an unintended consequence, I think, that came out of the talk that don't think she was planning for this. If you look at the upper left in the blue that I highlighted, this is what one of the reporters who came out of it said. It said, when all they hear from women is complaints about how their needs aren't met, how unfair it is for women, how their feelings are hurt, this makes men trust women less. So this is interesting because on one hand, the message is lean in. On the other hand, what I think Cheryl's not talking about is all the challenges that come with, especially for women leaders, in particular once you have children. This balance between work and home is the most difficult, especially for parents. There are some challenges if you're not a parent. If you have sick parents, I think you can have a huge work-life balance issue. But basically what I want to talk about is if you're not a parent or have sick family, like parents, you do not have a work-life balance issue. And I'm going to explain why, because that seems a little dramatic. You might be thinking, how is that possible if I'm working too many hours or whatever it might be. I'm going to explain to you why this is the message that I want to deliver. Because again, I think those challenges aren't talked about. So I'm going to spend the most of my time actually talking about what those challenges are and how to solve for it. So the other article that I just wanted to touch on really quickly before I get into the meat of it was in, it was the New York Times. It was a few weeks ago. And it talked about this link between parenting and leadership. We've talked about this before, kind of, parenting is the best crucible for leadership. And it says that many men often feel compelled to sacrifice their families to advance their career, while many women feel compelled to give up or cut back on their career to take care of their family. So it's actually saying neither one is right. In fact, it says companies actually suffer from both parents making poor choices. So it comes down to this, maybe this overused term, but around balance. Men and women both are doing the wrong thing at work and the wrong thing at home. It shows up in your kids and it shows up in the workplace. So it's saying we need to strike a better balance for both. So this message is for men and women, for moms and dads, but I'm going to speak in particular to the female, for the women, in particular the moms, because that's my experience. But I'll tell you, I'm going to show you actually, while we started solving for the moms, it started solving for the dads. For the women, it'll solve for the men, because that's just where the bigger challenge is when it comes to raising children, in my opinion, and it's what I've actually struggled with and what I've gone through. So that's kind of where this is coming from. So here's my prediction of the future. This is the new normal. A culture of supporting working mothers, you could say parents, a culture of supporting working mothers will be incorporated into strategic business plans. Women will pick jobs that have this culture. Those companies that don't won't be able to recruit or retain women. Companies that incorporate this into their culture as part of their brand will dominate markets. This is the prediction. This is what I believe the future holds. And again, like I said, I'm starting with women, but it'll solve for men and it'll solve for all of parents. This is the future. And I think this topic, again, is so relevant because, especially in technology, 20 years ago, kind of in the heyday of the .com, we were all much younger, didn't have children. Well, everybody's growing up. and I'm looking at some of you who are like, very, very new, so I'm not talking to you, but the leadership is growing and having children. So this is a much bigger challenge and being talked about way more than it was ever talked about 20 years ago, especially in technology, but it's happening in every industry, including the military, including finance, because it's such a big problem. You've heard us talk about it's the information age, it's all about your people, and this is one of the largest challenges that people, our employees, actually face is becoming a parent. That is one of the biggest constraints on your time. And so that's why it's being talked about in such a significant way. And said another way, you guys have probably seen this slide when we think about recruiting and retaining employees, it's kind of the security guard in the middle, not letting people in or letting the right people in. But I talked about even at the Pentagon about how when it comes to hiring in particular, if you're only hiring from half of the market, you can't compete with companies that are hiring from the full market. I mean, the full talented population is men and women. It's moms and dads, men and women. It's not just one. And so I'm not here to talk about, should women be in the work? This is like, we're way ahead of that. Women are working in careers, they're successful, but it's saying that if you do not continue and solve for some of the challenges, in particular, like I said, that women, in particular moms have, you can't compete with other companies who do. And they are. And they're getting a lot more innovative in terms of what they do to solve for this. So, and then from an environment point of view, you have to build a culture, we talk about this all the time, of taking care of your people. We take care of everything as much as we can to help you perform at a different level. So I'll just really quickly, and again, most of you know this story, so I'm going to just rifle through this really quickly, but I gave a sense of my own experience here at Next Jump, which helps just give you a sense of why I'm talking about this. I started in '98, was a local sales intern, selling door to door when we had a print business, so it was that long ago. In 2002, when we had gone down to 4 employees, I was one of the 4, and helped the company build back up to over 150 employees when we were, again, down to 4. I joke about how I was always called for a long time one of the lucky ones. Yeah, I was really lucky. I wasn't getting paid, and it was like one of the most difficult times of our lives. I've had to retrain my mental model. It says I wasn't lucky to be here. I was actually very fortunate to get the experience that I got as young as I got it. In 2003, the significant thing that happened there is when I got engaged to get married, one of our female board members actually told our CEO not to promote me. This is when the business started to pick back up, to run the merchant business, which was really hard for me because, in particular, given that she was a woman, I couldn't believe she would say that I couldn't do the job because I had just gotten engaged. And she said, "Shirley, don't promote her. She'll just be planning her wedding." Obviously proved her wrong. That's not the case. Within a year, she was like my biggest champion as I started to move the business forward. In 2008, I hit kind of another hurdle in my growth. This is when we focused a lot more on the advertising side. We were charging merchants, advertising fees. And so it was, multi-million-dollar contracts. I started to feel like I was really over my head. And I basically at some point gave up and said, just hire somebody that I can report to. I will be an amazing player for them. I will get in there, I will sell, but I just can't lead this team anymore. It's just beyond me at this point. So in very interesting style that our CEO had me interview those people, all men who came from very accomplished backgrounds and industries and heads of sales in big, huge companies. And I interviewed all of them and realized, wait a minute, why am I giving up? It motivated me a lot. Why am I giving up the role that I kind of earned to get here through all the muck, to give it up to somebody else who's just going to come in here, swoop in, and reap all the benefits? I can figure this out. So it was a kind of a turning point, I think, in my career when I realized they don't know more than I know. I've been here, and I deserve the opportunity to kind of get to this next level. So that was just another huge thing that I went through at Next Jump. And then in 2009, the milestone there was I had Matthew, who's my first son. So he's 5. He's going to be 6 in 2 weeks. And the significant thing there, I don't know if all of you have talked about it in front of the company maybe a few times, but he was born with something called hemifacial microsomia, which is basically one side of his face is smaller than the other side is what it means. So he was born without his left ear. He has damage on kind of all the nerves around his eye, and his jaw is shorter. So he's got, a slew of different issues that we're dealing with. He's doing great. He's thriving. But, it just came with a lot of extra stuff, if you will. And I had him, I think, at 32 weeks, so 8 weeks early. It was right after we were in our first New York Times article. It was like a week after we came out of stealth mode. And I went into the hospital, and I remember asking the woman, with the nurse, did I go into labor early because I'm so stressed? I said, I have so much on my plate. I have such a big role in this company. is it just because I'm stressed? Like, I thought it was my fault. I felt a lot of guilt. And I asked her that. And this is in New York City. And she looked at me, and I was like in tears. And she looked at me and she said, everybody in New York City is stressed. And I remember thinking, I'm so glad she said that right now. So whether I fully believed it, I appreciated the fact that she kind of reminded me that it wasn't my fault, that I didn't cause this to happen. It is a fluke. It's a very common birth defect, but I just was like, this has got to be my fault. It's from stress. It was not. And then 2012, I had Brendan. So Brendan's my other little boy. He's 3. And this is interesting because the constraint of the second child, so those of you who have 1, it's heavy. But 2, it's like, it's not, it's exponential. It's not like having 2. For some reason, it's like having 5. So for those of you who have more than 2 children, I'm like, including my twin sister, I'm blown away. I think it's so difficult to me just having 2. But the significance of the second one was the extra constraint I felt. And it's actually the impetus of how we changed our organizational design of how we run our company. I don't know if you've heard the story, but the flow model, so where we have a coach, a captain, right hand, left hand, and every initiative is owned by every employee from revenue to culture. That came as a result of having Brendan. So I someday when he's older, I'll say, you were the impetus for kind of a major change in our company, because the conversation went like this with Charlie. On maternity leave, I live next door, so I took a walk with him one day during lunch, and looking forward instead of looking right at him because I was afraid, I said, I have something I want to talk to you about. I want to work part-time. And I just kept walking, and there was complete silence, and he said, okay. And in his mind, he thought I meant like 2 days a week from like 9 to 2 or something like that. I was like, no, that's not what I mean. I meant like a few hours on a Friday, maybe a Friday off. Like, I don't know, but I just feel so stressed already and constrained. I feel like I'm going to need some day to get things done for myself and grocery shopping, and I don't even pick up my kid from preschool, just be around more. And he was like, okay, we can do that. And I don't want to run the company without you. So we're going to have to figure out how to grow more leaders. Because during the day, we ran the company, and at night, like, our side project was culture. I mean, it would literally be coming up with a theme for Coronitas. So we worked around the clock, and we ran everything, and we were in charge of everything. We led everything. There was no such thing as coach, captain, right hand, left hand. We ran everything. So ultimately, we were responsible for everything, and it just was too much. So we said, we're going to need to grow more leaders. And then, wow, that's a heavy thing. That's going to be a huge change, and it's going to take some short-term, I think, pain in the company in order to grow that into the business for the longer-term benefits. So if you didn't know where that came from, that's where that came from. And then where we are today, so close to 200 employees, you guys know this, in New York, Boston, San Francisco, and London. And you know what Next Jump does. This is what I shared again. The print business, that's me on the cover of it was like the Tufts book, a few other books. The corporate perks, and then now moving to perks at work. But what I shared was the $2.5 billion in sales, growing from 1.6 last year, 700 million the year before, and then perks at work, which is where we're moving towards this year, going into next year, and kind of some of the recognition we've got from Harvard, from Johns Hopkins, from being a best-run company from development to health and wellness, to Simon Sinek Igniter, to Jim Lear, we're the demonstration project. There's all these things that we're being recognized for in terms of how we run our company. So back to the topic of work-life balance. 2 phases of your career, and this is for everybody here, 2 phases of your career. And like I said, you can replace mom with dad, but there's before basically becoming a parent, and then there's after becoming a parent. And here's the differences, here's what it looks like. Before you become a parent, you have what I call unconstrained time. If you don't have children right now, you think you're constrained, I'm telling you right now, you have unconstrained time. This is your chance to gain experience. This is your chance to actually build relationships, trusted relationships. By the way, it takes time to build trusted relationships. It takes going through massive suffering together and bonding together. That's how you build relationships. You don't build relationships through like sailing through, sunny days. It's all through stormy seas. That's when you actually build the closest relationships. And think of anything in your life where you became close with people. It's usually some form of suffering that you went through, whether it's all-nighters in college, on a project together. But this point of knowing you'll have constraint later, and this is why I'm sharing this, train like an elite athlete now. Like, this is your chance. This is your time to be unconstrained. When you're constrained as a parent, in particular for, again, like I said, for moms, it's the quality of time that you have. You don't have as many hours. So you have to focus on the quality. But like I said, if you haven't trained and learned what not to do before, it's just going to be that much harder. So which is why I'm trying to share the message of focus on the hours, the effort, whatever you want to call it, before you have children, because after it's that much harder. And this is where you have to draw from experience. This is where making the right judgment call is the most important thing. It's not about hours, it becomes all about making the right call. But if you're not making the right calls, it's going to take more hours. So it's learning how to do that. Parenting lessons can be applied to leadership, and then it's even like learning techniques to engage and disengage. The example I give all the time, it's not about hours here, it's not about hours at home. However, if you don't learn to engage when you're here or learn to engage when you're home, you're going to feel like you're doing neither one well. I don't know if this resonates, especially for the parents, that a lot of moms will say, God, I just feel like I'm doing neither one well. I don't feel like I'm, killing it at work, and I don't feel like I'm killing it at home. And that's one of the worst feelings. And that's why a lot of women and parents in particular will just give up and say, I can't do it anymore. So I always use the example, if you don't know what I'm talking about, is to fully engage with the kids. So after working a full day here, I run home, and I'm thinking I'm exhausted. And for those of you who don't have kids, you get to like lay on the couch, play Xbox, do whatever you want to do. There is none of that. It is like they haven't seen you all day, and you walk in, and they're like puppies. They run up to you, and they want your undivided attention immediately. So can you call up the energy to be fully engaged with them in that moment? Can you give them what Jim Lear would call the sweet 16? Are you fully engaged? And you actually have to train this muscle, just like you have to train it when you're here in this meeting right now. He'll talk about, are you engaged? Are you listening? Are you thinking, what do I have to get to next? You can get more out of it when you're engaged. It's like it seems counterintuitive, right? I'm just here, I'm gonna learn something. You're not. It's just like when you're at home with your kids, if you're just there, you're not gonna get anything out of it. They're not gonna get anything out of it. So when I go home, if I really feel like I need to give it my all, we do what we call the dance party. Sometimes it turns into a naked dance party. Not me, but them, naked. They call it naked boy. They do that. We plug my iPhone into like the little station, whatever, and it's like 15 minutes of just letting loose chaos. It's not kids' music. It's like, the music we all listen to. They love it. It is so much fun. I like dancing, so they like it, music, and we just go crazy. I think our neighbors probably absolutely hate us. I don't care. It's 15 minutes. They love it. They're exhausted, and after that, they need a break, and then I get a little bit of a break. But that's what I mean by learning how to, engage in. And then I'll talk about techniques of disengaging in a few minutes, which you're all going to be very familiar with. So before becoming a mom, like I said, but here's the number one thing as a takeaway, if you're not a parent right now, is practicing authenticity. Obviously talked about this before, this lying, faking, and hiding problem. I talked about it in April on First Friday. So if you weren't here in April, go watch the talk. It's still so relevant, and it's still such a challenge here, but it's an even bigger challenge outside of Next Jump, but even here, and this is what I mean. If you act like you know what you're doing when you do not, it is going to catch up to you. And it's going to catch up to you in a big way. If you don't solve it before kids, if you're trying to solve this after, it's so much harder, because now you've covered up all the things that you don't know, that you didn't understand, and it just snowplows. So the point where you have a few hours, you got to go pick up your kid or do whatever you're going to do, and you need to be on, and you've been faking your way all this time, it's going to catch up to you. So again, like you can watch the video again. Do not act like you know what you're doing. Do not say yes, and walk out of the meeting and then say, I have no idea what just happened. I have no idea what they were talking about. It is going to catch up. It's going to take you longer. It's going to ripple into the people that you're leading, because they'll know you don't know what you're talking about, or they'll believe you, but you didn't know. It is awful. Stop doing that. Like, that's the number one thing to practice. If you don't understand, ask me after. Go watch the video. Like, this is like so important. If you're a parent, again, like I said, if you didn't practice authenticity, you better start now, immediately, deliberately. However, engagement becomes the focus. It's not about the hours, the time, the effort. It's actually about engaging, like I said, engaging, but then you got to learn to disengage, which we're going to talk about. The video I talked about, you can go and watch on the lying, faking, hiding problem. This I put this in, obviously we were in the Pentagon. Prior to that, Charlie and I actually visited Parris Island, where we saw the boot camp for the Marines and what they go through. So they put us through these yellow footprints, which is what every recruit goes through. I think I've shared some of this. It was the most frightening, what I thought was half an hour. It was 7 minutes of a drill instructor putting us through what these recruits go through, and my God, was I a little terrified and trying to listen. But it's hard when you're kind of being, lectured at like that. But the beauty of it actually is that drill, and where drill sergeants and drill instructions come from, is because it's the most basic form of learning. It's how you learn. You learn to take orders first. So there's a part of you got to learn how to take orders before you can actually learn to give orders. So you don't really want to hear this, right, I'm sure, but that's kind of it is what it is. If you don't learn how to take instruction, you can't give instruction. You can't lead other people if you don't know how to do it yourself. Like I said, building trust in relationships. This one thing I'll call out, learning, speak up, when to listen, but showing up. There's a phrase, FaceTime. You've heard of, obviously, FaceTime before. People say, I have to do FaceTime at my company, and I think in the past, Next Jump had some of that. The reality, I remember struggling with this myself, and actually talking to Charlie one night about it, and I thought, God, it just feels like we're here all the time. And you know what he said to me? I'll never forget. He said, Megan, you never know when there's going to be a moment where just by being here, something is happening. There's a challenge. There's a group of people working on something. And that just by being present, you'll get pulled into it. So you see them working on something, and you're sniffing around, and you're asking, can I help, whatever. And you start working on a project you had no idea you were going to be part of. But that late night, that bonding, that experience you go through teaches you a lot. That's like what I said before in terms of the suffering together. There's sometimes where there's all-nighters here, and if you ever experienced and you weren't here, and you come in the next morning and they're kind of like giddy about it, like talking about it, you almost feel like, I wish I was kind of there for that. It's a weird dynamic. But if you haven't seen that side of it, which is maybe getting to the other side, I don't underestimate what just being here and being present will do, because you'll just get pulled into things you never would if you're just not here. And I remember him saying, I can't schedule those things. I don't know when they're going to be. So I can't schedule it around your schedule, around your social calendar. That's not how it happens. It just happens. All of a sudden, a group is talking about something. It runs longer than they think it's going to run, and now they're here late night. They're talking about it. And if you're not here, you missed out. And that's all I would say for that. So that's my spiel on FaceTime. Okay, mother's choice. So here's the choice. If you're, again, back to this topic of work-life balance. So moms have one of two choices. Usually moms, some dads do it, but it's usually for the mom. They can stay at home or they can continue working. So I chose to continue working. My schedule, this was before when I had Matthew, was working 5 to 7 days a week, right? We're in an intense technology industry. And if you think it's intense now, it's like half of what it used to be, I think 5, 6 years ago. The hours were crazy. And the amount of time I spent inspecting what we expect, so like I said, it was very top-down. Basically, myself and Charlie and the strat team kind of reviewed everything that was being done in the company. If we didn't think it was good, we'd make our corrections, send you back, review it again the next day. It was like, and then at night we worked on culture. So here's the approach of where it goes wrong. When you want to become, you say, I'm going to continue to stay at work, I'm going to keep doing this, but here's my hours, here's the constraint, here's the challenge. The biggest challenge is the approach of what you think about. You think, Faith, I'm gonna make this work. I'm gonna be an amazing mom, and I'm gonna be an amazing leader. It's all willpower. The reality is there's a lot of challenges, and a lot of people just don't talk about what those challenges are, and you just expect it to will your way through it and just find a way and just kind of suck it up and figure it out. But that's why I think it fails. So instead of spending 95% of your time talking and thinking about how you're going to make it work, this is going to be awesome, I'm going to figure it out. Actually, if you spend 95% of the time on the reality of what those constraints and challenges are, you create what we call, trending data points. Despite all the constraints, you start to feel like it's working. So that's why this approach goes all wrong. When you're all up here in faith, sometimes I give Nadia a hard time. She'll say, I'll do it different next time. You won't do it different next time unless you talk about why you're not doing it the right way now. And when you talk about that problem, that's how you get to solutions. And that's how you start to trend. And you feel like I'm marching up this path where I can actually do this. So again, this is all in the reality, all in the challenges. Here's some of the challenges that I came up with that I think are the biggest challenges, especially for working mothers. Taking care of yourself becomes a lot harder. Here's the priorities I used to talk about when I was, at least on maternity leave, and then maybe even a little after. Sleeping, eating, showering, which means there's days you don't shower and you might not really eat. Sleeping, you're so sleep deprived. So if you think about from a constraint, that's the priority: sleeping, eating, and showering. That's honestly what it becomes. And so taking care of yourself and exercising and all that, it's so much harder, right, after you've had children. Feeling alone, you have nobody to talk to, especially at work. You come into work, everybody's kind of doing their thing, and you're like a disaster. You're thinking about, I didn't sleep last night, this was sick. I mean, who knows the issues that you had even the night before. And you come into work and you feel like there's nobody to talk to. That's what most, I think, working mothers face. You have no time. That's like the obvious. You have no time. And balance with spouse is something that is not talked about a lot. It's a huge challenge. The job just got bigger. You have more responsibility. You have another human being you have to take care of. And there's a massive imbalance that occurs because if you're both working, now all of a sudden, whose job is it to take care of the kid? Whose job is it to take care of the home? It's a huge responsibility. And if you don't talk about it in the details, is where breaking points can occur, because it start getting resentful, and it can be a whole big slew of challenges, which I wasn't going to spend too much time on that, but that's a huge challenge. And then my future. You think about your future. Am I taking a step back in my career? I mean, this is just, to me, the top 5. There's probably a lot more that I'm skipping. But this is how breaking points happen. This is important. You may have seen me show the slide before. Have you ever heard the phrase, the straw that broke the camel's back? Here's what's interesting about that, visually. It's actually just, look at all the straws that are piled on, right? It's the one straw that you added onto that broke the back. So I think a lot of moms will think, well, I got to pull off all the straws. I can't do this anymore. It's like all or nothing. I cannot do it. I'm done. But actually, if you take that one straw off, the camel would get back to normal. It's like one little straw that could actually bring you back to normal. So you have to figure out what that one straw is for you. What that one straw was for me when I had Matthew was bath time. I remember this conversation saying to Charlie, I have to get home for bath time. The idea of having a little boy my baby, that I'm not going to get home for bath time at night. I have to be home for bath time. And some of you might be dinner, it might be, I don't know what it is. For me, the idea of not being home to give my kid a bath was like the straw that was going to break my back. I've got to figure out, and I thought it has to be all or nothing. I need to be home every night, at a certain time to give Matthew a bath. But the reality is, if just by taking off maybe 1 or 2 days, it was a way to balance it out. It was a way for me to actually, and I'll show you what the schedule became. Bath nights for me became Tuesday, Thursday, and usually Friday nights, most people, it's not a super late night. Most people, I think Friday nights usually leave, it's like an earlier night. So Tuesdays and Thursdays, Friday, 7 p.m. I live next door. I moved next door to make this even easier. Would leave at 7 o'clock to make sure I gave Matthew a bath. The unconstrained nights I was here, Monday and Wednesday nights, is when I had unconstrained time. So it was like pretending I don't have children, right? Unless something really went wrong at home, my husband would be home those nights. So Monday and Wednesdays, I was here as late as I needed to be to get done whatever I needed to get done, and I would schedule a workout, in between. So around 5 or 6 o'clock, schedule a workout. Now I'm taking care of myself a little bit, getting more energy, and get a kind of another sprint of work in on Monday and Wednesday. But the other nights I was home giving Matthew a bath, and that worked for a really long time. That was probably called program number 1, one of the most successful programs we created. And there's some unintended benefits, which I'll share. But the lesson I learned, it's not on or off, it's actually a dial. This misconception that it has to be all or nothing, it's not. It's like a little dial. So for me, the bath time, 3 nights a week, and here 2 nights, unconstrained, was something that was like the dial for me that kind of brought me back to normal, if you will. But the unintended benefits of this program, bath time, again, I added the workout, but then my bath nights were the nights when I'm home that my husband actually didn't have to come home, and he was able to add exercise back in because it impacts mom and dad. I'm not saying that the dads don't have it. It's significant for the dads as well. And so he was able to keep kind of a regularized schedule of exercise, a little to create more of a healthy balance for himself. But then the dads at Next Jump as well. So Tuesdays, in particular Tuesdays, again, like I said, Fridays usually people will go home, but Tuesdays became the night that all the Next Jump dads, I think Greg might do it Wednesday nights now, but there was like a night that every dad just started saying Tuesday nights, and the idea was at 7 o'clock, I'm out of here. Don't expect me to be here. And what happened was team members wouldn't schedule meetings or anything that would go too late. They wouldn't expect you to be here, and even the people working for you wouldn't expect you to be here, so they would kind of know and kind of rally around your schedule. And that's sort of what happened, again, in particular for those nights. Ideal if your team is doing it around the same times, but this program was very successful, and I think is still happening at Next Jump. And again, wives were happy. A lot of the wives of the Next Jump dads would say, you're never home, and then they could never say that anymore because at least they were home 1 night a week. And I think it's probably more like 2 nights a week now, but it goes in ebbs and flows. But again, like I said, this program has been awesome. The other program number 2, Talking Partners. So all of you know about Talking Partners, this framework of meet, venting, and working. And I talked about it at the Pentagon. It was interesting because I talked to 2 female officers, and they both have constraint because they're both got young children and their husband's working, and one just got a big promotion in the White House. And how do I balance this? And it's a big challenge. And I got to get home a little earlier. And what I was telling them is, imagine if they actually worked on a project together, worked on something together, and helped balance each other out from a character point of view. They're a little different, and push each other with the constraint that they have. They would actually get more productivity out. Because this was fascinating in the Boston Globe. There was an article literally a few weeks ago that said leaders who are working in pairs are 7 times more productive. And I think the stat was 65% of executives are actually paired up, meaning there's like a pilot and a co-pilot, which I didn't realize. We've been doing this for a really long time, but the notion of there's a pilot and a co-pilot, that you're working together and one can see things the other one doesn't see, and you're both responsible for everybody on the plane. That's happening across the country. 65% apparently of executives are paired up. And again, 7 times more productive. So these female officers said to me, oh my God, so if we work on something together, and they said we already meet and vent about all the stuff that went on last night, my husband this, my kid this, and they're already doing that. They're not helping each other get to that third part, which is the work. They're getting all the toxin out, but they're not having each other get to work. And I was like, I think you might see a material impact if you actually start working together. You both have a similar constraint. So the TP program, if you're not in a TP, and then the new organizational design, the flow, which I talked about before. This is kind of program 3, and this is a much bigger systematic change in the company that we did, like I talked about before after I had Brendan, but the innovation of the coach role, which was the captain before, and this coach can't jump on, the coach of a football team can't say to the captain, you're not doing a good job, and just run out onto the field and take the ball. They have to learn how to, show the person how to actually do it and talk to them and truly coach them, the short term, the long term. And so this is a huge innovation for us. It changed how we run the company. Everybody's now responsible for running the company. We're all being trained as leaders. It's giving more people an opportunity to run events in the company, run initiatives in the company that we never had, I think, before 2012. And Harvard, when they studied us, they called us a captain creating machine, right? This is where we're cranking out more and more leaders in the company. So in summary, I talked about baking this into your culture. So program number 1, it's actually little things that can make a huge difference. Program number 2 is Talking Partners. So talk out all the toxins that you have. And then become a leader of leaders, right? Become a coach, like learn how to coach. And this parallel between parenting and leadership is very there. Trust takes time. I talked about people need to trust your judgment. Then it's no longer about hours. 2 hours of your time will be worth more than 40 hours of your time, or 40 hours of somebody with poor judgment. So it's saying get the experience, learn better judgment, which I know sounds obvious, but it comes with actually just pure training and hours and time and experience. And when you do this, 2 hours of your time will be worth a lot more. So the role model that I think is missing right now, I kind of carved out. Secretary of the Air Force says she's chagrined that more women don't strive to be fighter pilots. So this is not our industry, but when you think about the technology industry, they don't see enough role models. So it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? So the last thing I was going to talk about was just my story, and some of you have heard this before. I'm totally going way over 5 minutes, less than 5 minutes. Why this is so important to me, I think why this is so relevant to me, this whole topic, is this is my family. So I have a twin sister, Erin. She's all the way to the left. I'm on the right, my mom and dad. And it comes, for me, kind of the internal voice that I have actually comes from my mother. And just really quickly on my mother, she's one of 4. She's got 3 brothers. And by the time I think she was 12, her youngest brother was 3, she started to be called Little Mummy. She basically took care of her 3 brothers and my grandfather, because my grandmother had bipolar, and pretty severe bipolar, and was in the hospital, I think, for months on end. So she'd go for a month, shock treatment, come back for a few weeks, go back. And so she really had a hard time taking care of the family in the way she wanted to. So my mother, being the only girl in the family, ended up taking care of the whole family. I mean, and back then, men weren't even really allowed in the grocery store. This is crazy to me. So my grandfather would drive her to the grocery store, tell her what to go get. He'd wait in the front of the store while she went and got everything. And she just literally just became the mother of the family. And I think it was really hard for my grandmother to be so sick. And she sort of took it out on my mother because She was the other woman, and so she just took it out on my mom, unfortunately, and what ended up happening is my mom was actually pretty smart, got into one of the best dental programs, Tufts Dental, especially back then, was one of the best in the country. I think it still is. And it's, most of the women, it's very hard to get into. And she took all these tests, whatnot, and she got in. And a few months ago, I had asked her, like, why didn't you go? Like, what happened? And it wasn't the money, because all her brothers actually went to college. She said, nobody supported me to go. And she said, oh, Meghan, those times were so different, whatever. But the reality is nobody supported her to go, and she earned it. She more than earned it. I mean, she got a really hard time from my grandmother. She took care of all her brothers. She took care of my grandfather. And nobody supported her to go. And so when I think back to that, and that story she has in her head of, I will support then, no matter what, when I have kids, I'm sure is the narrative, right? I wasn't supported, I will support no matter what. So fast forwarding to when I was younger, it's two stories I was going to share really quickly. One, when I was 30 years old, I took my parents, my husband, my sister, her husband, and my in-laws, all of us, to Las Vegas to celebrate my 30th birthday for a few days. And I was with my father, like teaching him how to gamble for the first time. Like $25 was like more than I had so much fun with $25. And we come running off, and everybody's sort of waiting for us in this little cafe to go wherever we were going. And I overhear my mom having a conversation with the whole group. And I lean in. As I get closer, I was like, what is she talking about? And she's talking about how, when Meghan was in 7th grade, 13 years old, I went up to the school and I asked her geography teacher, why is Meghan getting C's and her twin sister Erin getting A's? And I'm sure the teacher was trying to say it very politically correct, say all the nice things. And finally she said, Mrs. Lombardi, it's because Meghan's not that smart. That's why she's getting C's in this class. She's not that smart. And so I'm hearing this for the first time at 30 years old. So she held that in for 17 years. And at the time I'm thinking, God, she's clearly sharing it because she thinks I'm over it. Which to a certain extent I am, but I had no idea. And I remember thinking, wow, I can't believe she would share that with that big of a group. But there was a part where I don't think she meant to do this, but there was like a condescending nature I think she had to me. She coddled me a lot. And not having shared that with me for 17 years, I mean, you would think you would tell me that, God, this is what's happening and we gotta help you. But she never shared that with me. It was kind of protecting me. If you don't need to know this, and so I knew it. And that's the hardest part. I knew I had a twin sister who got A's on everything and I didn't. And even if I got an A-, she'd get like an A+. I mean, it was ridiculous. I struggled so much. And so I studied. I was always studying. I studied all the time through high school and college. I worked so much harder than everybody around me for so long. Even at Next Jump, this is what's crazy. Even at Next Jump, I worked so much harder, I think, than most people. And I look back and I want to come up with all the reasons why it should, why it wasn't me, and it was just I got lucky and all this stuff. It wasn't. I just worked really hard. So when I reflect on that, I'm like, God. And as a mom, I really want to make this work. And I think about so what I didn't share is my grandmother had to quit her job when she married my grandfather. That's how it was. So she quit her job, got bipolar, and my mother said years ago, I really think that if she had continued working, maybe her bipolar wouldn't have been so severe, because she would have felt more purpose and maybe more fulfillment in working. And she was very smart. My mom was very smart, didn't go to Tufts Dental. She was a stay-at-home mom, and she was an amazing mom, and she wouldn't take it back for the world. But there's a part I think that's always been missing. And then here we are, my twin sister had her third baby 2 years ago and just quit a very successful career at Bain Capital, running one of the largest, as the head of the tax division, reporting to the CFO at one of the largest hedge funds. And she just quit. I can't do it anymore, Meghan. I can't do either one well. And I was like, God, why is it? This is such a relevant and such a hot topic for me. Because it didn't work for my grandmother, it didn't work for my mother, it's not working for my sister. And I just feel like it's ridiculous. Why is this happening? And so I think it's because nobody's talking about the real problem. Everybody's trying to hide it and not really talk about the real issues. These are the real issues. And so when I reflect and say, for those of you who are not parents, maybe I just want to say, don't screw this up, because it gets so much harder later. So learn to be authentic. Don't act like you know what you're doing when you don't know what you're doing. Stop doing that. Stop doing that. I'll tell you, it's so hard. It is so much easier said than done. I did that for so long. It makes it so much harder. Stop doing it. And you can train this, but you're being judged, you're going to worry that you're going to cry, that you're going to get angry, all those things, it's just going to hold you back, and it's going to take you that much longer. So, and that's just one reason why I feel like it's not working for a lot of moms. But I think that was my story. I believe you can do both, obviously, and I want more women to feel that they can do both, but it doesn't come without a lot of hard work. You have to earn it. Earning it is a big theme for me. The struggle I have is my biggest impediment as a leader is I feel like I have earned everything I have, but I really want to give it to everybody else without having earned it first. And that's probably the biggest impediment I have to my own growth is that just I earned it, but I'm like, you don't need to earn it. I'm just going to give it to you. And the problem with that is you'll start to get entitled. Just because you're a mom, you're not entitled to anything. You know, leaders are smart when they say, you know what, if there's going to be a woman who can be here and get the job done better than a mom, they have to pick that leader. They can't just pick the mom because they're a mom. That's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. You have to do the work. It's hard work. You have to do it. There's no shortcut. There's no way around it. All I can say is practice authenticity. That will help you in a significant way because the world is filled with people who are lying. They don't want to lie, but they're not saying the truth. They're faking everything, or they're hiding and they just say nothing. It is bad, bad, bad. So if society is teaching you to do that, which is part of the problem, don't do it here. You know, start with a TP. Start at home. Like literally, just don't do that. That's I think probably the biggest takeaway. And then again, like I said, I think as a parent, it's learning how to disengage with TPs, all the things that we've talked about at Next Jump. And like I said, you got to earn it. This is at the Paris Island. I love this. It's earned. It's never given. You have to earn it. And the takeaway was just to build a culture of supporting working mothers. I put it in brackets because it's working dads, it's parents, because you're all eventually, if you want to be, will be a parent at some point. And then programs drive systematic. And then the last piece, programs will drive a systematic change into the organization. So on one half, it's up to you. On the other half, the company itself can actually make it easier by driving in these bigger changes, bigger organizational design changes into the company. Words don't change things, actions do. So start doing something differently starting today. And that was it. Thank you. Sorry it was too long.